Welcome to Tell Me Your Story, New Paradigms for a New World. I'm Richard Dugan, your host. I thank you so much for joining us as we give you choices and knowledge of those choices to help make your dreams come true. We are here on Sundays at 7 a.m. and 7 p.m., Monday mornings at 1 a.m., Wednesdays at 9 a.m., and then our special edition on Wednesday at 9 a.m., with Monday through Friday from 8 to 9 a.m. following the news, streaming live at those times at richarddugan.com. Well, podcasts are on SoundCloud, iTunes, TuneIn Radio, Spotify, Stitcher, Player FM. We're on YouTube where you can watch these conversations. I hope you'll subscribe and click notifications so when I post a new conversation, well, you know what happens. You're notified. And then you can tune in and listen in and get educated and informed and hopefully a little entertained as well. We also hope that you will spend some time going within, listening to that still small voice during this, the decade of perfect vision. Also letting you know that Choices, 5 Steps for Life is now available on Amazon.com. It's paperback. It is also hardcover and Kindle with the Audible coming soon. All I have to do is sit down and record it, folks. So eventually I'll get to that, hopefully very soon, and you'll be able to listen to it as well. We also hope that if you can support the work we're doing financially, we would be gratefully appreciative. We have a PayPal account, which is there for your security as well as ours. And you'll just put in my email address of richard@richarddugan.com, and that's where it'll be sent. And we greatly thank you for the support that those of you who have given and for those of you who will. With all of that being said, we have a rather interesting program that can be more effective if it's on YouTube, which of course this is. Maybe not so much on the podcast or the broadcast, but then again, we'll find out from our very special guest. Her name is Dr. Abbie, beg your pardon, Dr. Abbie Maroño, I believe. Is that correctly pronounced, Doctor?
Yeah, Maroño.
Maroño. Abbie Maroño. Doctor, you deal in basically the behavioral sciences, correct?
Yes.
How did that get started for you? What was it that intrigued you about the behavior of others, I guess, or maybe your own, that said, "Hey, I want to go into this field. This seems rather interesting to me. I'm fascinated by this."
Yeah, well, that's a really interesting question. And most people don't fully understand what it is that I do because I do work in a few different fields.
Hmm.
So they get a little bit confused what aspect of behavioral science I work in. But it really got started because I have such a huge love for psychology. When I was 16 years old, I was in a very bad situation. I had a really rough upbringing and I was kicked out of college and I was kicked out of my psychology class. My teacher and I did not have a very good relationship. She did not like me. I did not like her.
Ah.
I was a little bit of a menace to the class, I was allowed to come back to college and repeat both years at once because they didn't want me to repeat the year and stay for an extra year. They wanted me gone. So they allowed me to, yeah, I mean, that was as nicely as they put it. We don't want you here for longer than you have to be here legally. So they allowed me to do both my AS and A2 at once, which I believe is high school for Americans, but the age of 16 to 18.
Hmm.
Um, so I had begged my psychology teacher to let me back, and I promised that I would put in the work. And
Mm.
before that point, I had no interest in psychology because I had no interest in anything really.
Mm.
But she gave me a chance, and I started to try. And
Hmm.
I realized, I wonder if this subject could help me understand my own feelings because I was dealing with a lot of trauma and a lot of really bad behaviors and feelings. And I was coming out of a pretty serious drug addiction by the time I was 16 also.
Mm.
So I had a lot going on that I didn't understand. And I didn't have a safe place to go to either. My mom was very abusive, so she was never a place to go to. So my psychology teacher almost became a surrogate mother for me. And she really helped me through the process of getting back into college. And she helped me fall in love with psychology because she believed in me. So it gave me hope. And then
Mm.
I started to fall in love with the subject because I started to understand myself a little better. And I started to realize I'm actually really good at this. And as soon as I found something that for the first time in my life, I'm actually good at this, this could be something for me, I just fell in love.
Hmm.
And my whole life changed. I got rid of all of the friends I was with before. I completely took myself into isolation, really, and just focused on studying and building a better life for myself. And in that year, I went from failing the subject to I pretty much got 100% on all of my exams in psychology. And I haven't looked back. And there hasn't been a moment of my life since that hasn't just been all about psychology and all about education and all about work in some way because, like I said, I just fell in love with it and it was a lifeline, not just a career choice for me.
Well, at first glance, as you were describing your psychology classwork, I felt pretty good because I took psychology in junior college. I liked it because it intrigued me, but I didn't do well at it. I think I not graduated. I finished that course that semester with a C, but it was interesting to me. It always has been. As a matter of fact, I then went to work some years later for a Christian radio station. I say it was the best education I was ever paid for because I learned about sociology and psychology and political science and all of those different aspects. And one of the things that always stuck out to me was with some of these folks who would rail on specific issues. I mean, and just it was like every single week, if it was a weekly or even a daily show, it was the same thing every. And I'm sitting there going, you need to be real careful what you are screaming and yelling about that other people are doing because somehow I think you're going to get caught in it. This was in the height of the televangelistic era. And that's exactly what happened. They got caught in the trap they set for themselves, basically. And so,
Yeah.
but it was a great education, as I say, that it was the best education I was ever paid for. And I was there for 15 years. So I went through my initial 12 years of education and then did another 15. And I'm curious from your standpoint, as you say, as we were sharing beforehand, that it's not something that you can sit there and, okay, in the first 5 minutes of our conversation, I've got Richard all figured out. Now, you might, I don't know, baby, but it takes time because there's preparation and there are certain things that you administer to the individual as well as observe, and that's not something that happens in an instant. And so I'm curious. Oh, and by the way, just so you know, I just saw the tail of, I believe it was a cat that just
Yes,
went
I've
by.
just seen.
We have
They just opened my door and let themselves in, so I do apologize.
no apology necessary. We love it when animals enter. It says to me that they're a little interested in what's going on. Okay, and so I know it's absolutely fine. I love it when they show up on these programs. It's unfortunate that those folks who are on listening to the broadcast or podcast, I didn't get to see the cat. But if you're looking at
I'm sure
watching
he'll
on
be
YouTube,
back.
yeah. But I'm curious as to if there are individuals, either down through history or even in our modern day, that intrigue you because of what you're observing. And granted, what we observe in the media or social media or television or what have you is only a very short glimpse. Okay, they're snapshots. And I know that you need more than that. But I would venture that you're still able to make some level of determination as to what the socio psychological makeup of an individual, and sort of, even if it's just for your own personal observation and query, you sort of make your own assessment.
Yeah, so to break your question down, the first aspect really is there's so many different fields of psychology and behavioral science.
Hmm.
And where I specialize is behavioral analysis, meaning I examine human behavior in the form of things like nonverbal communication.
Okay.
And then I look to understand how human beings make decisions and then how we can influence those decisions. So that's really my specialty and specifically information security and information elicitation. So if I want something from someone, how do I make them think they want to give it to me is pretty much the best way to describe that, to then get them to engage in that behavior. So it's all about understanding how people think so that we can alter their decisions and how we can understand how they will behave in the future. And it's a great skill set to have for sure, because it really is applicable across all aspects of life.
Yeah.
So when you do observe extreme behavior, it is very interesting. It's interesting for almost all of us, look at morbid curiosity. So we're all obsessed with anything that's abnormal. Look at serial killers. We are so obsessed with serial killer behavior because it's so abnormal.
Yeah.
So when you ask me, is there anyone that I'm, really drawn to observing, because it is so different than the normal. My background of research is in serial killer behavior. I published my first papers when I was 19, working with FBI data, and I worked with Joe Navarro at that point. That's how I actually stepped into nonverbals. And it was looking at serial killer behavior because I wanted to understand what makes an individual so extreme.
Mm.
And when we lack what it really means to be human, because empathy really is what it means to be human, and compassion and understanding and this connection to others, it's so deeply ingrained into us. So I was very interested of the behaviors of serial killers because it lacks those real human aspects.
Hmm.
But obviously those are extreme cases. And then to answer the other aspect of your question of, does my skill set make it much easier to really understand people's behaviors from a snapshot? I don't think anybody can be understood from a snapshot. Now, what you can do with a snapshot is, of course, we do this all the time in investigative interviewing and any kind of crime scene analysis, or really any kind of analysis, is we need to take a clip and assess what's going on.
Hmm.
But you can't identify what's going on underneath the surface. All you can see is what is there.
Hmm.
So, for example, if you take an interaction of two individuals having dinner, and it's very, very negative, you could make the assumption of, okay, I'm seeing these negative behaviors. These are the emotions that I'm seeing. Absolutely, you can do that. What people think you can do, which you can't, is go, this is why I'm seeing them.
Hmm.
So if I observe these negative emotions, they're very situational because human behavior doesn't happen in a vacuum. There's tons of reasons why behavior happens. Maybe I'm negative in this interaction because I have a stomach ache. Maybe I'm negative in this interaction because I had an argument prior to this interaction and I'm carrying those feelings. Or maybe it's to do with this exact interaction only. They said something that I didn't like,
Hmm.
or I have some kind of issue with something they're doing. The point is, all I can tell from analyses, that behavioral analysis, is what emotions are being felt at that time, not the why. Also, what we can't do is you cannot assess people's personality based on situational behaviors, only emotion at that time. If I took multiple interactions of that person and looked at them in private situations where there are no apparent cameras on them because they're going to be altering their behavior if they know they're being recorded. So if I had real footage of them or was able to observe them in situations they weren't aware, then yes, I could absolutely make judgments on their personality. But from clips, say we, see people on the news or we see celebrities in interviews, it's very artificial. So we can't make 100% clear analyses from that kind of data, but we can make psychological assessments if we're given enough time with that individual in realistic settings.
Hmm. I interviewed a gentleman who wrote a book having to do with sociopaths and psychopaths.
Mhm.
Another word you could use also, I think, is narcissists. And I asked if it's possible, because most of us who have empathy, uh, we would not think there's anything you can learn from these three categories. I mean, they're just so diametrically opposed to the community concept. It takes a village, and that I'm responsible for me, but I'm also responsible for what I do in the community in which I live, because it'll come back on me. Karma and those kinds of things. For reaction, there's an equal and opposite reaction. And he said, believe it or not, there is something we can learn from these people. And that is that, okay, it is true most of the time, if not all of the time, that the ends do not necessarily justify the means. However, these people, they get things done. We may not like how they got them done, but they get things done. So instead of trying to ponder the why, as you say, because we don't know whether it was this moment or the moment before or the decade before, a trauma, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. What about the aspect of trying to have empathy? And it doesn't mean that we like the person or like what they do, but we're just trying to understand. So maybe we can move on and say, okay, I have a better understanding of this person's person and personality. And I'm not going to allow myself, and this, I love this phrase, I'm not going to allow this person to live rent free up here in my head. Um, is that is there anything along those lines that ever comes up in your analyses, and not necessarily, well, from that professional level where, all right, this person exhibits these particular behaviors, and this is maybe what they've accomplished in their lives or hasn't accomplished. Now, in the case as you, because your study is of serial killers primarily, that's not an accomplishment that I can think of that we could really learn a whole lot from. What I do know is I have no desire to take the life of another human being for any reason. Um, but at the same time, I'm just curious. Has that ever come up for you that they show certain traits that are, I don't know, maybe they are positive traits, maybe they are good traits, even though they are also serial killers.
So, in terms of the dark triad traits, so we have psychopathy, sociopathy, and narcissism. Um, they are considered antisocial personalities.
Hmm.
And narcissism, I mean, they're all very misunderstood because they have been popularized. So we hear so many myths about them. For example,
Yeah.
narcissism is so widely overused. And most of us have narcissistic traits. Almost every single individual shows behaviors which are in line with narcissistic traits. Absolutely. There are points in our lives where it makes sense where we absolutely have to be selfish for our own well-being. And that in itself is a narcissistic trait, but it doesn't make you a narcissist because a clinical narcissist is narcissistic personality disorder. It's the collection of traits that are long and enduring.
Hmm.
So there are traits for each of those categories that we all have. And
Mm.
for example, individuals who are sociopaths, they can have they can have cognitive empathy, but not affective empathy. So affective empathy is I feel your pain. Cognitive empathy is I understand your pain. It's different. I
Hmm.
see that you're hurting, but I don't hurt with you, but I can understand that hurt from a cognitive perspective. Both of those things are really important. But the thing with affective empathy is if I've caused you pain and I feel pain too, I want to stop doing that. That's so deeply human.
Mm.
But someone who doesn't feel that might be able to make decisions that are better for themselves, or better for, say, they need to fire someone from the company. They know that it's the right thing to do. But if you're highly empathetic, that can be a very difficult thing to do if you feel other people's pain very deeply. If you don't feel their pain, but you can understand their pain, you can make that decision, but you can also do it in a way that is kind because you understand, okay, they're going to hurt. I might not hurt with them, but I understand they're going to hurt. So I'm going to make this logical decision. So individuals who are sociopaths and narcissists kind of sit on a very different side of the bench to psychopaths. Because
Mm.
psychopaths, to be a psychopath, there is really that need to almost purposefully manipulate and cause harm. And psychopaths, they have reduced activity in their fear center of the brain. So they don't fear the consequences of their actions. So fear is a great motivator for us to behave well because we don't want to face the consequences of not behaving well. Psychopaths don't have that. So not only do they not have that empathy factor, they also don't fear their behaviors. So they're very, very dangerous. I have never seen in the assessments of serial killers that I've done most of them are not psychopathic. It's a vast overgeneralization to say that every serial killer is a psychopath. That's not the case. Just like everybody that's selfish is a narcissist. Again, it's not the case.
Hmm.
But I've never observed a serial killer that is a psychopath that I've gone, yes, there's traits there that I admire. That has never been the case for me because it's such an extreme
Hmm.
sample. But what I will say in terms of the empathy factor is you said, is it difficult to almost not feel that empathy because it is human?
Yeah.
Yes, absolutely. I've handled really extreme data where you look back in their lives and most of the time there is such extreme abuse.
Mm.
The profiles that make up very dangerous individuals are very dangerous profiles. And typically they have had such horrific lives that you get to that point and think, of course, they're going to do something bad. Look at what they've gone through. Now, that doesn't mean that people who have had horrible lives will do bad things, and it absolutely doesn't justify it. But when I'm looking at data and I'm looking at this person that's done these awful, brutal things, and then I work my way back through their life, and now I'm not at a person who has done these awful, brutal things. I'm at a young child who is innocent and who just wants love and to survive and
Hmm.
nurturing parents, and they are going through extreme, serious trauma. I can't help but feel empathy for that child, but it doesn't mean that I justify or feel necessarily empathy for that later behavior, but
Hmm.
I understand it. And it's very difficult not to feel it for that younger version of them.
Uh, I, um, I find it. There's a comparison, and forgive me for making the comparison, but from what you have just described, it reminds me of the interactions that a fictional character, and I think you know who it is, by the name of Clarice, who
Yeah.
was, I think, sort of psychoanalyzing Hannibal Lecter and
Yeah.
sort of trying to understand where he was coming from. And I get the sense that maybe the work that you are doing is sort of kind of in that arena. Am I far afield there, Dr. Abbie?
So it is funny that you say that because as a scientist, I am deeply curious. It's the enduring trait of every scientist. My favorite question is why? I love that question. And the funniest thing is, I love not knowing too, because it spurs on deeper investigation. When I started being a researcher, because before I moved into the private sector and before I started working in security and training federal agencies and things like that, I was working as a full-time academic. I was a professor, and I'm still an academic now. I could never give that up because when I started to be a researcher, I realized there are these questions about human behavior that we don't know the answers to. We don't understand why people do certain things.
Hmm.
So if I can be a part of that understanding to create this knowledge of why people do things and how to make them behave in other ways, that was incredible. And it just made me so curious about the why. Because if we don't understand something, that's an opportunity to learn why it works.
Hmm.
And obviously diving into literature too, if there are things that are understood, but I don't understand them yet, what a great opportunity for me to go and educate myself and learn more.
Hmm.
So I'm so deeply curious about that why. So I do have a tendency to put myself in situations where there is unusual behavior occurring because I'm just so curious. And sometimes there are people that you should remove yourself from
Hmm.
because, okay, well, this person is showing behaviors that I don't want in my life because I don't want them around me to influence how I feel about myself or the
Hmm.
world. But there is that thing in me that goes, but I also want to be around it to study it. So there have been people that I have had in my life that, we call ourselves fixers sometimes. And you go, well, I can fix this person because I want to understand them. But that's a trait that hasn't always served me well Because it's different when I do it from a research perspective and I'm given a sample and I'm given a controlled environment and I can run experiments. And now, recently, I've been training agencies like FBI, Secret Service, Homeland Security. So that's a great opportunity to go and put this knowledge into practice and train. And I have to remind myself sometimes when I take this curiosity and put it in those professional circles, that's great. I have to remove that curiosity sometimes from my personal circles, but it does become difficult because I am naturally very drawn to curious behavior and abnormal behavior.
Well, one of the things that I have come across in my life is that, especially in the context of interviewing people for the past 45 years, uh, the more questions that come and the more answers I get to those questions, even more questions come. And
Yes.
I'm just a curious individual. However, my particular philosophy is that the universe asks the questions. I'm just along for the ride, but I have been given a very curious mind, a questioning mind. I don't necessarily accept at face value what I'm being told. And especially when I start processing it in my head using what I consider to be logical thought, or some would call it critical thinking, it's like, especially when it comes to, well, because of my 15 years at the religious station, I'm sorry, but that answer doesn't make any sense. It's illogical. Original sin, but later in that same old book, it says that the sins of the father are passed on to the sins of the son to the seventh generation, which means after the seventh generation, it's over. So how is it that I'm still guilty? Because Adam is obviously maybe 700,000 or 7 million generations in the past, assuming again, if you accept that story as the truth. That's just one example, and there are many others that I could tout. I do want to ask because I was intrigued because when I got the book, and by the way, folks, that's right, we're having her on the program because she has written a book, and the book is entitled, I love this title.
Thank
Work
you.
in Progress. Aren't we all? The Road to Empowerment. And of course, it's dealing with the combination thereof, shame and empowerment. We're going to get the connection to that. But I wanted to ask, because I saw this in not only the bio information, but also on the book cover and so forth. If I'm correct, the little mark over the N in your last name, I think they call that an umlaut if I
Yeah,
remember my Spanish. Uh,
my
s-
family,
I'm sorry,
my
say again.
on my dad's side, they're
On your
Spanish.
okay, and so I was thinking, okay, uh, Maroño is how that's.
Maroño.
Say again,
Maroño.
Maroña. And I
Maroño.
learned in Spanish class. I was able to roll my R's. Most of the kids couldn't, but I could. And I don't speak Spanish. But
Yeah.
Dr.
I've
Abbie
had
Maroño is my guest. And go ahead, please. Go ahead.
I'd say I've had some variations of the name, and that's why I tend to just go with the English version, because it's difficult to pronounce for most people. So I'm happy either way. Spanish, English, doesn't matter to me.
Well, Dr. Abbie Maroño, I love rolling the R's. She is my guest, and I have to tell you that having done this for 45 years, and I have really worked hard at it, and I'm not always successful. Once again, a work in progress. I find it the height of disrespect when an interviewer who has the opportunity to get the name of the guest correct doesn't, and then continues even after corrected to make the mistake. And so I don't want to continue to make that mistake, and show you the respect that you have earned and deserve, to say the very least. And then I want to talk about this book in with the it's entitled, folks, Work in Progress. And by the way, her website is abbieMaroño.com. That's Marono. That starts ABBIEMARONO.com. We will be linked to your website, Doctor, so that folks can find out more about you, find out more about the book, as we find out more about the book as we continue here on Tell Me Your Story. I'm Richard Dugan, and we are here talking about, well, we're going to talk about the book that our guest, Dr. Abbie, has shared with us, Work in Progress. I don't want to say it's a tired old phrase or a oh, there's another word I can't think of it. Oh, it's one that they'll use phrases and they'll use it and it's like, can't you come up with something better? It's like telling someone, my condolences for your, I'm sorry for your loss. So what, why did you do it? You know, especially if the person passed on from natural causes. I almost said something like that to someone when I told them my father passed away, and they wanted to say I'm sorry. Don't, because you had nothing to do with it. My dad was now almost 92, and he'd lived a good life. But this word or this book, Work in Progress, I think that it speaks to a lot of us who are really trying to go through a process in our lives of self improvement. We're trying to grow beyond maybe how we came into this world or the things that happened to us. Just like you had, as you shared with us just a little bit ago, some of the traumas that you went through growing up, and you have grown beyond those, and maybe because of those. Is that a fair assessment in terms of this particular work, which I know is based on a lot of great information and some statistics and observations and what have you? Share with us a little bit about the impetus for work in progress.
Yeah, so it's very different than the work I'm known for. The work I'm known for, as we talked about, was a lot of dark psychology, and then moving, to nonverbals and information elicitation and all of the good stuff in security. So when I released a book on self-help, people were very confused, and I was also not known as someone who was very open or vulnerable. I wasn't always in the positive psych field. But I had gone through a lot of really difficult things in my life, not just through childhood, moving through my life. I had both engaged in bad behaviors and been subject to bad behaviors. And I was struggling. I was very much in a state of chaos for a lot of my life. And I couldn't find something to help me. I looked for all these TED Talks and I looked at all this media online to try and help me understand why I was doing what I was doing and how to get out of them. And I was looking for self-help books to help me get out of them. And nothing really stuck because what you do see on the market is, as great as these self-help books are, most of them are very well intending, but they're not based on science. They're not based on human nature. They're not really based on how the brain works and how the body works, how emotions work. They're just based on what we want to hear and
Mm,
what people think we
mm,
want to hear and what sells. So I turned to the literature. I looked at the academic literature. I'm like, okay, I'm a scientist and I'm curious. Let me remove myself from it and imagine I'm a data point. And what would I do to that data point to understand it? So I sought to understand my own behavior and my own traumas and heal in that way. And I got myself to a point where I was really at the worst I could have ever been. I was moments away from suicide, really. I was just so deeply in pain and unhappy. But I managed to pull myself out of that. And then I got to a point where, I'm so happy with my life and truly feel fulfilled and passionate. And it doesn't mean everything's perfect all the time. Of course, I still have struggles, but it was the research and the science that got me to that point. But most people don't really have access in the same way. And even if they do have access, they haven't trained and they haven't got the PhDs and the degrees to understand what the research is trying to tell them. But they also deserve access to it. So, what I wanted to do was communicate that science in a way that could be digested by the everyday person, but
mm,
still enjoyed by a scientist too. And then I realized also, because I had painted myself as this real cold individual, because I was trying to be this powerful girl boss, and everything you see online is like you've got to be harsh and cold and do these things. So I really put that as myself, and I had this hyper independence of I need nothing from anybody. I had a very stoic mentality. And I worked through that through the literature, but I also realized that when I painted myself that way, I wasn't someone that people wanted help advice from. I wasn't someone that people felt comfortable speaking to about their issues. My students would come to me originally, but the persona that I put on, it didn't make them feel safe and comfortable. So they wouldn't
Mm,
open up in the way that, I felt that they needed to. So I realized I had to make that change in the way that I presented myself too. And I couldn't pretend to be something that I wasn't. So
mm,
I let go of that cold outer shell that I was protecting myself with because I thought people can't hurt me if they can't get to me. They can't upset me and hurt me if they really don't know who I am underneath. Because you can insult this outer shell, fine, it doesn't matter because it's not really who I am. But if you insult who I am to the core, that could hurt.
mhm,
So it was really a self-protective way of presenting myself, but I couldn't help other people if I was doing that. And it wouldn't be authentic either. How can I tell other people to do the hard work and be vulnerable and do all these things if I'm over there in the corner pretending that I don't get hurt and I don't have these feelings and I don't have these worries and I don't struggle with mental health? So I realized now I can't do that anymore. And it's tiring and I'm done with
mm,
it. So I stepped out and was like, you know what? These are the things that I've gone through. And these are the
mm,
things that I feel deep shame about and that I'm working through. And this is how I've worked through them. And when I painted myself as less like a robot and more like an actual human being that does need kindness and does need warmth and is warm also, it helped people in a way that I couldn't otherwise. So I realized all of that needed to be in the book. And that's why in the book, I put my story in there too. So as I'm teaching other people how to work through their journey, they're not doing it alone. I'm there with them. And there's things in the book that when I wrote them, I'm like, oh, this is so embarrassing, these things that I've done. I don't want them out there. And I took them out. And then I realized I can't do that because
yes.
it's so dishonest. So I
Mhm,
put them back in. And I realized when that book is published, I have to be so ready to face myself. And I realized I am because I need to. If
yeah.
I'm going to be someone that helps other people and says, you can hold my hand and we'll do this together, I've really got to do the work too. So there is things in the book that people will read and go, wow, that's honest and that's a little bit embarrassing. And I'm like, it is, but I don't feel shame for it anymore. I feel embarrassed. But those things in the book, I felt deep shame for, and that was my journey. And this is how
Mm.
I worked through it. And I wanted to give that education to other people so they could look at things that they had previously felt shame for and not feel shame, or potentially not do things that would cause them shame later on too.
Dr. Abbie Maroño is my guest, and we are talking about work in progress. At first I thought, oh, God, why doesn't she say a work or the work in progress? But I actually think that the title work in progress is so much more appropriate because yeah, that's the old saying. That was what the word, a phrase I was looking for. These wise old sayings or these sayings that are used by a lot of people. But the reality is that's what we all are, work in progress. And we're just I wrote a song not long ago, about 4 years ago. I wrote a song as I was going through my stuff. And of course, you know as well as I do that a lot of musicians down through history, but especially in the last 50, 60 years, when they write from the heart, when they write from their life's experience, it almost guarantees they're going to be a million. They're going to be a big star, a superstar, international, maybe $1 million seller, a million record seller kind of thing, because people relate to it. And mine was, and I did perform this in front of a small group of people at a at a nursing home once, and the parents and kids were there. And the title of the song basically is "I'm a good man doing the best I can." And I think that's true of all of us, yourself obviously included, because and it seems to me that it seems to me, again, this is again the perception based upon the snapshots that we all get, that there are some people when we see these snapshots who don't care. They have no interest in changing. They have no interest in getting better and being more of a community member. that it's all about them. And I do have to say that, I'll say this as apolitically as I can. When I watched the latest debate between the presidential candidates, I felt so charged and energized when she was talking and smiling and laughing. It's like, it has nothing to do with her policies or anything or her political position. It's the fact that I was getting so tired of the gloom and doom and negative energy that was coming from the other. And it's like, oh, a breath of fresh air. I can breathe again. And I get the sense that, and even in my book, Choices, where I talk about, matching your personal input to your choice and choosing who you want around you, not just physically, but also even in terms of what you watch and what you read and what you listen to. And that seems to me that makes a big difference. Now, I don't know if there's any science behind it. I know how important that is, but it seems to me that that's an important factor when it comes to this work in progress that we all are, that you are talking about, and saying, look, yeah, I've got these experiences, and yeah, right now I feel ashamed. But if I can surround if I can surround myself, not necessarily with yes people, that's not what we want, but with people who will at least support me in the work that I'm doing, that I can do more in that regard. Is that how you began to feel as you began to open up, as you began to share, whether it was in the book or through sharing with your students, and they would come to you, and that helped you because you really felt like I'm getting somewhere. I'm getting better, if you will.
Yes, so I mean, we are a social species, and we know that when we surround ourselves with people, we do take on the traits of those closest to us. What's interesting too is biologically we become more like them also. There has been studies done that when you spend a lot of time with someone, even your microbiomes become more similar. So we
Oh.
biologically do take on a lot of the aspects of other people and we start to think like them. You
Hmm.
start to take on their language, you start to take on the way they speak, the way they walk. People that spend more time together, their nonverbals start to look more like each other's. They start to behave more similar because you work into each other's routines and you might start eating the same things, changing diets, things like that. So the little things that we have around us, whether it's our diet, whether it's how much time we spend on social media, all these little things that we do, the things we surround ourselves with, the daily habits that we have, all of those things absolutely make up who we are. Those little choices that we don't think do, they do. And a
Hmm.
huge choice that we seem to think is a small choice is who we surround ourselves with. And especially our romantic relationships because they are so emotionally consuming. That's just the nature of our relationships. For example, the parts of our brain that process physical pain are the same parts of our brain that process social pain. That's why social rejection hurts so much. And that's
Hmm.
why emotions are so overwhelming. And emotional centers of the brain, like the amygdala, they hijack critical thinking when they're activated. So of course we act out of emotion, and of course we get assumed. I mean, of course we get consumed by our relationships. That's just the nature of them. So when you
Hmm.
are surrounded by very negative people, say they start to slowly break you down or they start to criticize you, it might be slowly drip, drip, drip. You start to criticize yourself more. Or
Hmm.
maybe they have very negative eating habits, or they don't exercise very much, or they're very critical and judgmental. You might start to take on those traits too, and it's going to start to bring you to their level. And it can happen very slowly, it can happen very quickly, also, especially in romantic relationships. And if you look at the people around you and you think, I don't want to be like these people, well, why are you around them then? Because that's the energy that you are inviting into your life. And I
Yeah.
don't mean energy in this sense of, people talk about healing energy and crystals and all of
Right.
that.
Hmm.
Not that kind of energy, but there's no other term to describe it other than they bring with them a presence.
They've
And
got a
with that,
vibe. They've got a vibe.
their attitudes, their nonverbals, their
Yeah.
perceptions, all of those things, they creep into your life, your attitudes, your belief systems, your perceptions. So what I have found was there were many times in my life that I was in an environment, whether it was a career or personal, that I didn't enjoy the people around me, and I was choosing to keep them around me. My mom is an antisocial personality. She has antisocial personality disorder. She's very dangerous, I would say, in an emotional sense, very emotionally and verbally abusive. And I had taken on the way that she spoke to me as the way I spoke to myself for most of my life.
Hmm.
Because our relationships are so important to the way that we view the world and ourselves, when I removed her entirely from my life got so much better
Hmm.
because I removed that presence. And it was hard because that's someone that I loved, even though she was hideous to me. I still loved her as a mother,
Yeah.
but I had to remove her. And those decisions, when you start to notice toxic behaviors and negative behaviors in people, if you don't try and work with them and you say, hey, I noticed this behavior, and they don't want to correct it, they have
Hmm.
no intention, they don't want to change. And let's face it, change is uncomfortable. Of course it is. But we should want to be better and kinder and more informed. And if they don't have a desire to do so, then that isn't a healthy person to be around. And I am so lucky to have the support system that I do. I have some incredible people in my life that I admire and that I would do anything for, and I know would do anything for me. But I have built that, and it's taken me a very, very long time. I am on my own 90% of the time. And I have been on my own for a very, very long time because I'm so selective with who I allow into my space, because it has taken me a very long time to craft a person that I'm happy with. I didn't like those other versions of myself. This version of myself, I am proud to be. And I'm proud to say that I'm going to grow into someone who's better because I'm determined to be better and to learn more. And I'll still make mistakes, but the reason that I'm excited about who I could grow into is because I look at the people around me and I go, wow, look how kind they are. Look how smart they are. Look how forgiving and how intelligent they are and how
Hmm.
much they want to be better. If I can take some of those traits for myself, but also make them better too, because you have to think to yourself, if I want to surround myself with these high quality people, I have to be a high quality person. I have to bring them something. So whether that's I work with them to support them or help them improve knowledge or help them improve, okay, let's work on our routines, let's work on our diets, let's be healthy, all of these things, I try and add to their lives in a positive way because they add to mine in a positive way too. So when you're looking to heal, the best first step is who around you is impeding on your healing? And is it possible to take steps away from them? It doesn't necessarily mean remove them from your life entirely, because that can be really difficult to do. Maybe that's a future step, but maybe it's not. But what can you do to move away from those people and move towards more positive people? And that simple step is huge when it comes to healing.
I extend my congratulations to you for your accomplishment in your own personal life. And I'm glad that you have done the very thing I've talked about on this program for years, how important it is to create and develop a
Yeah.
network of people who care. And in some instances, and I have a sister who does this, who will call you on your stuff. Okay. They'll call you
Yes.
on, she calls me on my stuff on occasion. I was sharing a little bit of my observations of my late father. I used a word she did not like, and she was honest with me that she didn't like it. I said, okay, I will keep that in mind if I bring this up with you again. But it was just one of those things. And again, I go back to that song title, the song that I wrote. I'm a good man doing the best I can. And the following line has to do with my mother and my father. Where I'm going is where I'm coming from. It's my parents as well as my sisters and brother who taught me. And yeah, there were some situations in schools and church and other places, but predominantly that family. Now, I don't have a history of all kinds of traumatic events. I was bullied in school, but I learned how to run. I was great in track and field in school. Let me tell you, I was fast. Um, but I think it was because of and not in spite of that that the family I grew up in, I like to say, not exactly Norman Rockwell, but pretty close. I mean, it wasn't perfect. We had our squabbles. My brother and I got into fights on occasion, but there, as far as I know, there was never an estrangement amongst us eight, and so forth. And then when I hear stories such as yours, I'm going, "Oh boy, I better not talk about that because you know." But then again, we all have our ups and downs. We all, I mean, I've been divorced once already, and have committed never to do it again. I am currently married to my second wife, but I have no intention of, my intention is to make it work no matter what it takes. And we've been together for 26 years. So, um,
Congratulations on the 26 years. That's an achievement.
it is
Um,
indeed. I'd hoped in my first marriage to outdo my parents, who made it almost 62 years. And then when I got the divorce, I'm going, darn it, I got to start over. I got to start the counter over. But by the same token, my plan is to live to be 100. At least that's my plan. What the universe has in store, I do not know. We're talking with Dr. Abbie Maroño, and we're talking about work in progress. I hope you'll go to her website, and it's abbieMaroño.com. We'll be linked to that website, and we hope you'll get a copy of Work in Progress as we continue here on Tell Me Your Story. Dr. Abbie, I want to ask you as we continue here, in terms of this process that there are different methodologies that we use to try to improve ourselves, to try to facilitate the work in progress, if you will. When I was sounds a little like the Frank Sinatra song, when I was 21, I went through a program called LifeSpring. It was a personal growth program, and I'm guessing they're still out there. I just don't hear about them much anymore. But back in the 80s, they proliferated. And I went through this one called LifeSpring that was an outgrowth of EST. And they did kind of what you were talking about, the people that we have in our lives that have the negativity, that negative vibe. But they do it in a short period of time of only 2 or 3 days. And then they work to rebuild you. And one of the things that I think helped me most recently was I had someone who helped to facilitate writing that song. I'm a good man, doing the best I can. Are those kinds of programs, as far as you're concerned, are they, from what you may know about them, are they, do you think they're effective? Or do you think that we as individuals, certain things will happen in our lives and things will click? You've probably had someone tell you something, a piece of advice, and you heard it, and time goes on, and somebody else comes along and says exactly the same thing, and a light bulb goes off or goes on. And you go back to the person who said it to you some time ago, goes, oh yeah, uh, I heard this phrase and da da da. Well, I told you that 5 years ago. You know, is it about, we'll call it timing, or I like to call it coincidence? Events happen, at the right time that click within us because we're ready. Whereas if somebody just out and out says whatever it is they say, if we're not ready for it, it doesn't have that kind of an impact.
so there was a couple of questions in there. First, just go to whether these courses and these kind of retreats are valid and any good. And, I've gone to a lot of them, and as long as they're founded in science and they're supportive, some can be great, some can be terrible. It's
Mm-hmm.
really on a case-to-case basis, but I think the idea of getting out and working with other people to heal as a group, as a collective, is is great. I love these retreats. I
Hmm.
think that the motivation to go also is really healing because you're taking this step of, I've tried to do it alone and I can't, so I need help.
Hmm.
And that's great to go and seek that help and do that with other people. It's amazing because they're also on their journeys. But people think to heal often, I need to go out and do this big retreat because other people are doing it. But you don't need to because that's great. But then you go back to your real life, the retreat is done, and you're going to have learned some lessons. But human behavior is much more complicated than anything can be changed for good in a couple of days. Things take a long time to change because neurons that fire together wire together. Meaning, when we engage in behaviors and they become habits, it's consistent. So our brain will naturally try and take us in one direction because I do an action and my brain goes, this comes next. So it's going to want us to go in this direction. That's a habit. If we want to form healthier habits and thought patterns, not only do we have to go, instead of taking this step, I'm going to take this step. We have to unravel this step and make
Hmm.
a new one every single time, over and over and over and over and over again, until these fire together and wire together, and we've undone some wiring. You can't
Hmm.
do that in a week. You can't do that in a month. It takes time.
Yeah.
So these things are great, but they're not everything.
Okay.
So what we need to do is sit down and ask ourselves the hard questions. So in terms of the practical advice, what people can do, what tips they can take with them. And it's the same reason why your writing of the song helped is we often don't really sit with our own thoughts. So what happens is this thing in our head becomes intangible. We just have all these thoughts and imagine it like it's rattling around in our head. We can't sleep properly. We can't think properly. We need to get it out because we can't understand it otherwise. And that might be for you in the form of writing a song. It might be
Hmm.
for some people singing. It might be for some people being on the piano. But for most of us, just journaling it,
Yeah.
writing it on a piece of paper. Because what happens then is you take an intangible thing and you make it tangible. And now
Mm.
we can start to deal with it. So the simplest thing is to start journaling, writing down our feelings, and to start asking ourselves the hard questions.
Mm.
But we don't really want to do that because often behind that and behind our reason why we don't want to change or why we're doing things is often a lot of pain. It's
Yeah.
difficult emotions and they're not comfortable. I hate dealing with difficult emotions. We all do. That's the nature of them. I've just gone through a process myself also where I was coming out of what I thought was going to be a really successful, healthy relationship. And the realities of it was not that. So I had to come and sit down with those feelings and go, why did I allow myself to get into this situation? And how do I stop myself doing this again?
Hmm.
And you think, oh, I've done all this healing previously in my past. How am I here again? And it's uncomfortable, but you have to sit there with those feelings and you have to try and deal with them in a healthy way and not escape them through other bad behaviors or other bad relationships or things that aren't conducive to your healing. And it's uncomfortable. But it really does start with sitting down, having those hard conversations with ourselves and trying to get out answers. But again, going back to being a scientist, not being happy with a surface level answer. Oh, well, I did it because I'm angry. It's not enough. Well, I'm angry because he did this to me. It's not enough. Well, okay, well, he did this to me because I did allow this. Still not
Hmm.
enough.
Hmm.
Why did I allow it? Dig deeper and dig deeper and dig deeper and keep doing it. And each time you do it, it gets a little bit more uncomfortable, but dig deeper anyway. And you've got to keep going on that journey with yourself. It's very uncomfortable. But when you go through that period, eventually you get out the other side and you go, okay, now I understand myself a bit better.
Yeah.
I understand my decisions. I understand my behavior. I can make better ones. So I don't have to go through this process again.
Using the analogy of peeling the onion, because those are
Yes.
such thin layers, and
Yeah.
the more you peel, there's more to peel.
Yeah.
And yes, the onion does get a little smaller and a little smaller, but it takes a long time because those layers are so thin.
Yeah. And the onion is a great analogy because you makes you want to cry. It's been through layers. It doesn't make you want to laugh all the time. It's not
No,
easy. You're
no.
going, oh, what a great traumatic experience, or what a great bad relationship, or what a great terrible thing I did. No, it's uncomfortable.
Yeah.
So we do want to turn away from it, but we can't heal if we do.
Is there a point at which you're then, once you've gone through the process, I don't know what the, if, enough, but is there a point at which you're able to stop and say, and I learned this, and I learned this, and I learned this. And and then you can now start giving yourself credit for. You can now say, I went through it and I'm still alive. And I'm still breathing and I'm still able to go into maybe another relationship, but with those lessons learned and what I now know about myself.
Yeah. So, I mean, there is no end because
Yeah,
life
yeah,
keeps happening.
right.
Life will continue to go on. But there is no point where we should stop and say, now I'm proud of myself. We should be proud of ourselves the whole way through
Mm,
because you want to change and you want to grow. And you might have a long way to go. There's things in my life that I look back and I go, I don't believe I'd ever make that decision again. And I'm really proud of myself for being so far away from those versions. But there's still other things that I struggle with. And maybe I'm at the beginning of those things because we all have multiple journeys that we're going on. And it doesn't matter where you are within that journey, you should still give yourself grace because
mhm,
you're trying. And that's hard. It's hard to try. And if you don't give yourself that grace, you're not going to be motivated to push yourself through. And if you don't go, okay, I deserve this healing, rather than I've got to get to the point that I deserve it.
mhm,
Well, you're taking a very negative view on yourself, and you should heal and be better because you deserve to be happier. We
mm,
all do. We deserve those healthy relationships. And again, it really comes down to the way that we speak to ourselves and the way that we speak to others too. So, a really good way to tell how far someone is on their healing journey is how they treat others. Because somebody who is unhealed and somebody who is very deeply in pain and angry and harbors a lot of negative emotion, they're the ones that are nasty and they're the ones making mean comments to other people. They're the ones on their YouTube videos making nasty little comments. They're the ones spreading little rumors. And it's because no healthy, well-adjusted person who likes themselves, truly likes themselves, and
mhm,
is compassionate does those things. That's the sign of someone who has a lot of work to do. And what I always say to myself and teach my students is you might know what someone is going through, but you do not, and you never will understand the depth of their suffering. Even if you've gone through the same thing, you don't know how it feels to be that person. None of us do. And to your point earlier, we all have our own stories.
mhm,
It's like you said, I would never take offense if there's something I've gone through or something I struggle with and someone's talking about how much they love this thing. I would never take offense to that.
yeah,
My story is my story, and it
mhm,
has absolutely no impact on anybody else's because that's my personal journey. And it doesn't take away from anybody else's pain or anybody else's suffering. We all have our own struggles. Every single person has something because we're all human. And we're all affected by our relationships and by things we've gone through. And just the human condition is suffering. That's just the nature of who we are. So we should seek to be kinder and try and
mm,
understand other people. And a big part of that is being kinder to ourselves. Because when we are being horrible to ourselves and when we are unhealed, often we take it out on other people. But if we
mm,
take it out on other people, we wouldn't want that to ourselves.
mhm,
And I try and say to people, treat other people like you would want them to treat a loved one. Because when you say like you'd want them to treat you, often a lot of us accept poor treatment. And
mhm.
I can take a lot more because I have a very, very thick skin. I'm British. You can't offend me very easily. The more you offend me, I'm like, wow, congratulations. That hurt me. Good for you. So I'm not
Yeah,
offended easily, so I can take a
yeah,
lot. But when I think about anyone saying anything to my sisters or to
mhm,
my dad, that's crossed the line. That I don't accept. So when you think about treating other people like you would want other people to treat your loved ones, I think that's a really good gauge on how to recognize if we're being kind or being unkind.
I went through four steps some years ago. There was an individual that got under my skin, and it took me about 6 months to work my way through it. I finally reached the first stage, and the first stage was the hardest because I had to say out loud. The universe was saying, "This is the phrase, but you have to say it out loud for it to mean anything." And that was, "Thank you, teacher," the person who got under my skin, "for teaching me how not to be."
Yeah.
And the last thing I wanted to do was give them any credit for being a teacher, but that was the reality at that time. Then the next place that I went to was, "I forgive you, teacher, but more importantly, I forgive myself for
Yeah.
allowing myself to be dragged into this quagmire, this person getting under my skin." The third was kind of where you're coming from as well, is a question. And it's a non judgmental question. And the question is, what is it that you're so afraid of that makes you talk and behave this way? I'm not asking you to change. I just want to understand. So, with that understanding, I can move on. I can let you go and I can move on. And then the fourth stage was shared with me by one of my guests who said, it's three simple words. The fourth stage is three simple words, and you have to mean it. I love
Yeah.
you. I love you because you have every right to be here just as I do. And you have, just as you've stated, Dr. Abbie, you have your story just like I have my story. And you have your path and your choices and so forth. So I have no right to be judgmental over whatever it is that you're going through, any more than you have the right to be judgmental over what I'm going through, although I can't control that. And
Yeah.
those steps to me, really, they struck a chord with me because it helped me to say, you know what, it doesn't matter whether I see this person again or whether I hear them speaking again or whatever the case might be. That's not that. First of all, that's not me. I'm not going to behave that way. I'm not going to speak that way. I often would tell people, I said, if I spoke that way to my mother, the way this person speaks in public, my cheeks would be bleeding from being slapped because she wouldn't put up with it. And I don't have to put up with it because I don't have to, I disconnect. I turn off the
Yes.
TV. I turn off the social media. I listen to other music. And that was something I wanted to ask you about. And before we wrap up here, there are all kinds of ways in which we process and which we do the work that we do, as the work in progress, the title of your book talks about. And though it's been around for a long, long time, as long as man has been here, right now, it seems that music seems to be a focal point for a lot of people. I've had Jonathan Goldman on my program to talk about his work in music and sound and so forth, and all kinds of different sound therapies or singing bowls and blah blah blah. And I even read about the Mozart effect. And you talked about if fires and wires kind of thing, and that Mozart in particular, when listened to while studying, helps the brain to function in such a way that you study better. Maybe you retain the information, or you really learn it, or I like to say you grok it from the book Stranger in a Strange Land. Um, and so I wonder about, obviously, when you have people in your life, you have the sound, you have their voices. But what are your thoughts and obviously your scientific aspect perspective when it comes to sound slash music as a way of helping us to work through? And again, I'm not looking for quick fixes here because I know there are none. But what are your thoughts in that regard?
It's a very small part of healing. I mean, sound and music, just like any other creative outlet, is effective, but it's not the most effective. It's just effective, like many others. Journaling is another outlet. sports, activity, eating healthy. It's one piece of a very large puzzle. So yes, if you want to listen to music, and we know music can be great for some people because it helps them, other people tell a story that they don't quite understand themselves when we listen to other people's words. But we can also get that from, watching documentaries or reading literature, or reading a book or reading a fiction book. We can get that from there too. So again, it's a great healing tool, absolutely, but it's a very small piece of a very large puzzle. We get fixated on this is my outlet for healing,
Hmm.
and we forget that it's so much bigger than that. We need
Hmm.
to look at our diet. We need to look at when are we waking up in the morning, because our sleep and wake cycle affects our hormonal responses. If we don't rise with the sun, we have fluctuating cortisol levels. So we can't continue in our optimum state. If we don't get regular exercise, we also don't get the endorphin effect. And again, we're sluggish. We don't have that same cognitive function ability. So exercise and diet and routine, and when do we wake up and who do we surround ourselves with, and what kind of input do we have? Are we on social media and are we using it to compare, or are we using it to motivate and inspire? All of these things, music included, are all pieces of the puzzle. And really the way that I think sums it all up in terms of how do I know what to change is we need to recognize our own part in our suffering. So often we suffer and we go, it's because of all of these external things that have been done to me, or all of these awful things. But
Hmm.
what part do we play? What thing can I do to change? Is it, like I said, the diet or whatever it is? Is that I'm allowing people to treat me this way? Is it that I don't have clear boundaries? What part in my suffering am I playing that I can change? It's like, for example, we go through bad relationships. Let's take that, for example, because I feel like most of us have gone through at some point in our life a bad relationship. And there's that age-old saying of hurt people hurt people.
Hmm.
We get treated badly. And in a response, we see into ourselves and we go, I'm hurt now. So I'm going to now treat other people badly because I'm scared of what he did or what she did. I now don't trust people. So I'm going to be untrustworthy myself, or I'm going to be skeptical. I'm going to make this other person feel like they've done something wrong when they haven't, because I'm projecting. So we bring those bad feelings. But what we should be doing is going, why did I allow this hurt? And maybe we did everything right. Maybe we defy the laws and we were actually perfect, but there's still a lesson in there because, okay, well, now I've learned a little bit more of what to identify in the future. But I'm not going to now bring that hurt to other people.
Hmm.
How do I turn a negative thing into a lesson, into something positive? And that really comes with understanding the part that we play. And if we have gone into a bad relationship, what I would take from that, so from the last relationship that I can think of that was very negative, instead of thinking now I'm going to treat other people this way because it gives me power, instead, what I think is the way that he made me feel, I don't want to imagine another person feeling that way. So the behaviors he engaged in, I will make sure I never engage in. And what can I do to make sure I don't make a person feel that way? And you see it too with people who have been abused as children. Either they go on to abuse their children, or they go on to go, I never want my child to feel the way that I felt. So what can I do to be a better parent? So we can take that hurt and go, I'm going to hurt because of it. Or we can take it and go, how do I make sure I don't ever inflict this on anybody else?
And finally, regret. Does it play a role in any of this? Because my observation is if we had a time machine and we have regret and we could go back and change those things we regret, we would not be who we are today.
Yeah, that's a great way to put it. There are things in my life, like I said, I have done things that I'm not proud of, and that in a perfect world, I would take them back and still be the version of myself I am now. But
Mhm.
that's just not how life works.
Yeah.
And regret really isn't a functional emotion, because shame isn't, it's not positive, but it's functional because we can go, what has this taught me and how do I not feel it in the future?
Mm.
But regret, in a way we can use it, but regret really is so in the past.
Mm.
I don't like to carry regret with anything. And if I look back and think, would I change this if I could? I don't think so. Because as much as it would be great to have this neat and tidy history so that no one could ever use those against me, it would also make me inauthentic. It's my flaws and it's the things that I've done and that I've been through and that I've changed that make me who I am. And the worst times of my life have been the worst times of my life. I wouldn't want to go back and relive them, and I wouldn't want anybody else to relive them. But I am who I am because I survived them and because I worked through them. And I'll go through more awful things in my life. We all will. We all know that our worst days might not be our worst days in the future. There could be worse ones to come,
It could
or
be.
there could be better ones to come. You just don't know. What you can work on is moving forward and being better and learning from what you've been through. So I don't regret anything. I hope that I just continue to grow and hopefully continue to be better.
Well, whoever you connect with next is going to be a very lucky person.
Thank
I'm
you.
going to tell you, because you're doing the work. You are working on that work in progress that you are, as I am doing the same. And we encourage all of you to go to her website, Abbie Maroño, and that is .com. And we will be linked to your website, Abbie, so that people can find out more about you, get a copy of your book, Work in Progress, and find out more about what you're doing. And I don't know because I haven't looked recently. You live in Orlando, Florida, correct?
I do. I'm not from here originally,
Right.
but
No,
I do.
I kind of got that. Are you facing any extreme weather conditions as we speak?
There is a hurricane outside my window, and I am on tornado watch.
All right. Well, I will let you get back to Tornado Watch. We had a window in the front lobby of a radio station, the building where I used to work, and my boss would come out there and he'd stand in front of that window and says, "Who's on weather watch?" And the thing was, all you could see was the street, because the other side of the street was a hedge and so forth. But it was a
Yeah.
standing joke. So I'll let you get back to Weather Watch. Stay safe. Thank you so much for being a part of with the work that we're doing here to, as I like to say, we're trying to change the world, one interview at a time. Thank you so much for being with us. I do have three final questions I do want to ask you, if I may. But before I do, I want to thank you for listening to and watching Tell Me Your Story. New paradigms for a new world, where we're giving you choices and knowledge of those choices to help make your dreams come true. The questions that I have for you that I ask all of my guests at the end of every program. The first of which is, who is Abbie Maroño?
Oh, she is someone that cares. Oh, my thing just, sorry, my internet just switched off for a second. She is someone that cares, I think, about, in general, about people, about being better. I think just caring in general is a trait that I want to continue having.
What gets you up in the morning?
This might not be the most popular answer, but work. I love working. I love what I do. So the ability to love my job and to seek answers is what gets me up in the morning.
Mm. You're not alone. I feel the same way about the work I do. And the last question. What was your best day?
My best day, easy, was when I finally had my PhD graduation. And it was me, my dad, and my sisters. And I had gone through what felt like an eternity of struggle to get to that point. And I had moved on with my life. I was already living in Florida and I was already doing my dream job and I'd already healed from so much. And my mom wasn't there. It was just me, my dad, and my sisters. There was so much love and celebration. It wasn't even about the academic achievement at that point. It was just a day of love, family, and celebration. And so far, it has been my best day.
Well, wonderful. Well, again, I thank you so much for being a part of the work we're doing here. And we hope to touch base with you again to have a continuation of this conversation. This is fascinating, the work that you do, because one of the things I did want to get into, we didn't really get into in terms of observable behavior and so forth, is body language. I know
Yes.
that one in particular that I got attached to as far as this particular position was called open body posture within one of these programs that I went through, right? Where you feet on the floor, your hands on your knees, and you sit there and you're open to whatever comes to you in this program that I was going through. So when I am in an interview, or if maybe a job interview, or maybe I'm in a conference room, we're having a meeting or something, I try to sit that way so that I stay open to what is being said. I may not agree with all of it, but I'm open to at least the listening part. And so maybe we can talk a little bit about that next time we get together.
Absolutely.
All right. Thank you. And I thank you for listening to and watching Tell Me Your Story, New Paradigms for a New World. Until our next broadcast, podcast, videocast, love to all. Jeanette, I am still listening. Dad, be happy because I am. Smokey, I'll see you on the other side. And to my dear friend Zorro, aho, aho.